Tell everybody the good news, the core of the joy, and I appreciate that.
She usually gets you there by preaching from across the top.
What's going on, y'all? This is Josh from Team Super Shoe, and welcome back to another episode of the Shoe Show. We are not talking about Converse shoes. No, we are talking about the one and only Corey LaJoie, the super shoe of NASCAR, and just anything NASCAR related. Super pumped to have you guys today. We are talking to a good friend of mine from Team Super Shoe on Facebook, Alex Armstrong. He's stopping by, and we're talking about the past few races, the past month. And then we're previewing Bristol and the cutoff race and seeing, where's the playoffs going to lead after Bristol. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. If you could, please like, share, subscribe, all those stuff if you're on YouTube. The more you do stuff like that, the more it helps the algorithm to share it to all the different Corey LaJoie fans out there that maybe has not been suggested yet to watch the Shoe Show. If you're listening to the audio realm, please rate and review. And if you haven't hung out with us on Facebook, that's where it's all started. Team Super Shoe on Facebook. We have a lot more conversation there than we do here. This is more or less just an outlet to do cool things like chat with fans, do interviews, stuff like that. Otherwise, y'all, appreciate you so much. Let's chat with my buddy, Alex. All right, y'all, we are back, and we're hanging out with, he was the first guest ever on the Shoe Show. It's been going for almost 2 years now, and still a good friend that I like to bring around every now and then. Alex Armstrong, how are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a great day.
Yeah, man. You are in North Carolina, right?
I am. I like to say I'm nowhere near as close to the track as the Spire office, but I'm close enough that I can drive there on a moment's notice.
Nice. How's it been, man? How's the weather? How's life?
It's been hot. So at the end of the day, it's been hot. So it's nice to finally start cooling off a little bit. We've got the Roval coming up, so that's going to be fun right in my backyard. So I think we're gonna have a lot of fun. Gonna tailgate a little bit, go see the race. Obviously, the Kickball Classic is right around the corner as well, so it's gonna be a fun week. So that's what I'm looking for the most.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm finally being able to come up there, so we'll have to get together and have a beer or do something fun. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, guys, before we get started, we're just going to be doing some race reviews. Going to talk about the past month or so of racing and previewing Bristol. But before that, you guys are going to see pictures below us in the graphics. It's going to show different people that have done the I Need You challenge. It's basically where you post your hands like this on social media. You hashtag INEGU, I never ever give up. And there's a generous donor that has, because of this month being Cancer Awareness Month, the donor is donating $25 for every time they see that hashtag and picture of you with your hands. And so pretty cool. And the money's going to an amazing cause. I'm really going to be bummed. I imagine Nigu's not going to be on Corey's car next year because they even got a donor to have this sponsor to begin with. Because they're a nonprofit, so I don't think that they could afford to just, I don't know how much money it costs to sponsor Corey's car, but for 6 or 7 races, whatever it's been. But I'm gonna miss it, man. It's a really special sponsor, and Corey, it blends really well with that. So
obviously it's a worthwhile cause, and it's a great paint scheme, and it's something that everybody can get behind.
Yeah, man. Well, we're going to be talking about the last month or so of racing since the last time I talked to you guys about race highlights. So first up will be the Indy Road Course. Thought it was interesting that SVG, he loved racing the Truck Series, and he finished P19. For the actual Cup race, Corey qualified 14th, which was kind of exciting. He was actually in the contention to be in the top 10 for the first time. Unfortunately, he did get bumped out, but pretty cool to see that and see the progression. they had tire tests there the day after the race, and I imagine that means that we have no more road course, and I'm a-okay with that because I cannot stand the Indy road course. Corey, unfortunately, after a speeding penalty, he finished 29th, and Michael McDowell won, which I thought was pretty cool. It's not your usual Chase Elliott or anything like that. So good for Michael McDowell getting himself into the playoffs. Up next was Watkins Glen, which again I found interesting. I don't remember the schedule ever having road courses back to back. I could be wrong, but thought that was interesting. I kind of thought, well, McDowell can do two for two, and that didn't end up working out. Corey ended up running the ARCA Menard Series number 63. What he said was in exchange for work that's being done to his Barracuda. So the owner of that team or somebody linked there is working on his car. So he decided to go and help out that racing team. So it was interesting to watch.
I think that was a win-win for Corey, right? So he got to race and somebody work on his car.
Right. It was interesting to watch the ARCA Menard Series. Did not realize that ARCA is full of like 15-year-olds. Like it was, I could not believe how young everybody was. Corey's the old man and he's 30, Yeah,
you look at Corey and Frankie Muniz, and that's about the oldest guys that you see there.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Corey DNF'd in the ARCA race after getting the pole. He had an impressive start, but something fell off the car, and ultimately that was their demise. I remember him saying in his podcast that, a younger version of me would have just kept going, but older version of me saw Jimmy Johnson go head on into the wall, and I got a family. So he qualified 10th place in qualifying, and that was pretty cool. The first time he actually did get to, place in the top 10. Until he had a leak in spring, I think something got a leak and he had to start all the way in the back. So that kind of stunk. He finished 20th, and Byron ended up winning. And wanted to ask you, man, around this time, the rumor came out of Stuart Haas possibly losing 2 charters. I mean, I guess that must mean, if it is true, at least that Almirola is retiring. But does that mean they're getting rid of Priest? Like, do you think that there's any truth to that?
Yeah, I don't think so, man. I mean, if you're losing 2 charters, you're pretty much just closing up shop at that point to go from a shop the size of SHR. So I think, again, those are kind of rumors, right, to do with everybody going. We'll see with Barry and everything else around SHR. So they might lose one. They might turn around and try to sell one. They're obviously been hurting for a few years, so they might just get rid of one and focus on 2 cars. But that's as far down as I see them going.
Yeah. I'm. It's interesting. I mean, I know they announced Barry, and Briscoe has been announced as a multi-year contract. I haven't heard anything about Priest. A lot of people have talked like he's on his way out, like he's on the bubble. So I don't know how true any of that is. It's quite interesting though. Has to be some type of net gain if they were to cut their team in half.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is if Priest leaves, he's shown enough, even with the trouble that SHR has had, he's shown enough competition, right? He's been racing around Corey a lot. I know I've probably said a few 4-letter words staring at the TV whenever they're side by side personally, but he's also finishing up front a lot of times. So if anything, there's a lot of little movement, right? So you've got like the openings for colleague and everybody else that maybe he shifts over. So a lot of people are playing the openings close to the vest so far. So we'll see after the end of the year what happens.
Yeah. So, well, up next is Daytona. I got to go to this race, and thankfully it was a very sunny day with like 0% chance of rain that never happens in Florida. And it was quite interesting being out there. There is a lot of 7 fans. It's quite it's strange. He had, I mean, there's people, and it wasn't people from his team. It wasn't like friends of Leanne. They were just people. I mean, and they didn't even know who I was, like, or it wasn't like a meet and greet for the Team Super Shoe for the group. I only ran into one guy that I brought my buddy who was part of the group, but there's just people out there that are just becoming backers, so it's pretty cool. Corey, he qualified 37th, and man, that was a bummer. And I ran into Ryan Sparks that day before the race, and I introduced him to my buddy, and I said, hey, I asked him two questions. The first question had nothing to do with Corey's performance, had to do with if there's a new rule for qualifying, or I'd imagine there was a new rule, which there is, that since 2020, what you unload with is what you got. Now they can edit a few things, or they can change a few things, like the springs and all that, but it's just minor nuances. It's really not going to change the true speed of the car. So I remember back, before 2020, you would have a qualifying car and a race car, or you'd have a qual setup, and Mike Bostic was even telling me, I don't remember this, but that you could even switch out your engines. You can have a qualifying engine and a race engine. So but things have definitely changed, because it used to be Q trim and race trim, and now it's just, for Spire, it's just race trim, because that's all the time they got. So and then the other question I asked them was, hey, are we this is after qualifying, so I thought, well, maybe we're hanging on the back. And I asked him, and he said, oh no, man, we're going to the front. I said, all right, because I asked him, are we playing conservative tonight? So but unfortunately it totally was conservative, or at least he didn't have a good enough car that he felt was something he needs to stick up there anywhere between till the end of the race. It was interesting to see the wrecks, the 12 wreck and the 41 wreck, the two different wrecks. I honestly did not think that I was shocked to see that both of them were racing the next weekend, and not death, but like the protocols that NASCAR has, and concussions and everything. I especially the 12 wreck, he went straight into wall. It reminded me of Dale Earnhardt. Right. And I mean, he was cruising, 190 miles an hour straight in the wall. So crazy to see that they're okay. And if they truly are okay, if this is not something that's going to show up next year and they have some type of built up concussion or something, then, bravo on NASCAR for building these cars, because those were some wicked wrecks. And I can't remember the last time I saw a flip over. I mean, in general, I'm having a hard time. Like, it was back, I don't know, like when Brad Keselowski was having his beef with Carl Edwards, or I don't know. It's been a while. But it's quite interesting to see those wrecks and see that everything turned out all right. Besides what's his name's, the 41's eyes the next week.
Yeah, they look pretty rough. So
yeah. Corey, he ended up finishing 10th place, which is a good day for us. Buescher ended up winning, and Chase did not make it into the playoffs, and Bubba did make it. And those are the headlines then. And so I want to ask you a couple debate questions here from Daytona. One is Martin Truex won the regular season championship, and with that you get 15 playoff points. So you're basically the leader of the playoffs until the inevitable future. But do you feel like the regular season championship matters? Because I feel like it doesn't. Like they really ignore it on TV.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from a couple of different aspects, right? So obviously, recently there's been a lot of talk about this in different podcasts and on TV, especially when Chase missed it. But like, TV makes a big deal about the driver championship, right? But at the end of the day, what moves the needle is the ownership championship, right? Or ownership playoff points. And so I think realistically, that's where it becomes a bigger deal, right? And so obviously, talking about the business side or the owner car or how much that impacts the thing, that doesn't make good TV. So they don't cover that nearly as much. But I think that's obviously the bigger thing. I think winning the regular season championship probably plays off in your future Hall of Fame talks, right? Like, hey, I've won 3 regular season championships, right? And who cares if you made the playoff championship, because making it to the Final Four, I've heard, is almost like winning a championship in itself, right? So I think that really plays in terms of that. But yeah, to your point, they don't really cover it that much. So yeah, I think it's more about moving into the playoffs from there.
Yeah, I actually, I know that they've been doing it for years now, but like I'm just now hearing about it where I'm actually paying attention where, I don't know if it's because of this and the show and I have to, have notes and stuff, but it's just, you figured they'd make a bigger deal out of it. Because say what you want about the playoffs, it's just like any other sport, football or anything else. Playoffs aren't fair. I mean, they're all racing under the same rules, but it's not the best winning the championship. It's who's winning in these clutch moments.
Right.
So, Martin was the best all around, just like the old school championship used to be. And, there is a big difference in NASCAR in auto sports than football. Football is a one-on-one sport every Sunday. NASCAR, and then especially now with the new car and the amount of competition that's been, coming out. I mean, you have a good 20, 25, even, maybe even 30 drivers that have chances each Sunday, give or take, super speedways, anybody could win, but you have these, the sport is so competitive that, it's just, I'm just surprised that they don't make a big deal about it. Cause honestly, you don't see much of it. So
no, to your point, right? I think NASCAR's kind of taking that. Well, it's never a big deal in other sports, right? It's where you seed into the playoffs. To your point, like, hey, you get 15 points. That's a big deal. That's the first round bye essentially when you start talking about playoffs.
Yeah. So my other question I had for you is Chris Buescher. He now has, as we're recording this after right before Bristol, he has 3 wins for the season, 7 top 5s and 13 top 10s. I compared it to so far the favorite of the championship, Larson. Larson also has 3 wins. He has 11 top 5s and 13 top 10s. So very similar stats. Do you see Chris Buescher being the championship favorite?
Before before Kansas, I would say he's definitely getting hot at the right time to potentially make a push to the Final Four, right? Even when he wasn't winning, as the season progressed, him and Brad have always been competing at the end of the races up front. And so, unfortunately, he got kind of bit by the right rear tire, as did a lot of playoff drivers in Kansas. So we'll see how that impacts him, right? But at the end of the day, nobody wants a good driver like him or Larson to get hot at the end of a season or in the playoffs, because that's how you win championships. Doesn't matter how you start the season, it's how you finish. And so I think he still has a solid shot at it, particularly when he's got a partner in Brad who, unlike other teams, right? Brad is also an owner, and we saw it, at his last win, where Brad was content to push instead of racing side by side. If that was 2 Hendricks cars, there's a chance they crash because they're going to go for the win, even though they're teammates, right? They're going to pass turn 4 and go for the win. Brad knows that if he gets, Christopher Buescher into the playoffs and into the Final Four and even a championship, as an owner, he makes way more money than a driver, right? So he's got that business sense to understand, hey, it's okay for him to push. And I think that's going to be part of the big threat for Chris going into the playoffs.
For sure. So on to Darlington, first race of the playoffs. As we mentioned earlier, Ryan Preece's eyes was quite interesting. And it was interesting hearing him say that I also didn't realize that this was something that other drivers from the past have gone through as well. I can't remember, Ernie Irvin, or there's been a few drivers, and there's been pictures that's shown similar eye color and reactions. And he was just saying, I'm totally fine. It's just there's some type of like my blood flow, flipping so many times. That's how my body reacted, and quite interesting because it looked painful. But that was interesting. Corey gave the invocation at the Xfinity Series race, so I thought that was pretty cool. It's still cool that he stands up for his faith like he does. Corey, he was the last car on the lead lap at the end of the race. He finished 22nd, but it was a good accomplishment for that team because at one point they were 3 laps down, and it was a real struggle to watch as a shoe fan. Larson ended up winning, and a little side note is around this time, Nemechek was signed to the 42 for next year, so we'll see where all that goes. Kansas was our most recent race where Corey, he qualified at 24th. I don't want to jinx it, but Corey's stat is still no DNFs, the only car that hasn't had a DNF. And even if it were to happen this weekend at Bristol, he still outran the rest of the team. So Spire has a lot to be proud of there. And it's interesting. I had to go back to 2021 was the last time any driver in the Cup Series, full-time driver in the Cup Series, had no DNFs, and it was 2021 with Hamlin. And even last year, they didn't have any driver that had made that stat. So interesting. So Spire and everybody there should be pretty proud of that. Busher and Wallace both blew tires and hurt their chances with the playoffs. Corey had a pretty good run around 15th place or so, 20th place, and his dash went out. I guess, the computerized dash is now in the car, and so he couldn't see anything. He couldn't see what gear he was in or anything, and because of that, and that was right before pits at the end of the race, and he comes in, and they said, well, just try to mirror what the 5 is doing, and he, of course, gets a pit penalty for speeding somewhere in one of the sections. So that was a real bummer. He ended up finishing 22nd. Hamlin is still owed a wreck by Larson, and I'm interested to see if that's going to pay for your fruition here soon, because they were definitely talking it up on TV. And Tyler Reddick won, which was pretty cool to see, and cool to see him succeeding in that new team. So
yeah, his burnout was legendary, right? So
yeah,
leaning out the window and still burning out is pretty cool, especially after the comments from last week.
Yeah, I think the only person I've ever seen do that is Kyle Busch. So probably got some pointers there. They're Gibbs teammates now. So the race coming up this weekend, everybody loves Bristol, and it is a cutoff race. So wanted to ask you, man, last year was Chris Buescher. He won there. The year before that was Larson for the concrete track. Who do you see winning this weekend?
I think it really depends on Lady Luck at the end of the day, right? So when you looked at Kansas, you had Truex blowing a tire on the second lap, and whether it's Wallace or Busher blowing tires, and that really impacted them. So I think if they can stay clean, it's up to a handful of guys, right? Busher's been really strong, so hopefully they'll rebound. There's a couple other really good teams that I think have a good chance. But again, right, so Larson's been on a heater as well. I think he's probably pretty frustrated because once again, he came up short at Kansas, and nobody rides the wall at Kansas like him. So we'll see how he comes in, and who is kind of make or break at the end of the day of what they want to do, because there's a lot of drivers who we expected to move on that are sitting below the cut line right now. So I think you're going to see a little bit of desperation going into Bristol.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's what they want, right? NASCAR, as they want us to have interesting things to talk about, and that's why they moved away from just the point system to now playoffs. So I would agree. I honestly, feel like Hamlin's probably going to take the win this weekend. And not that I like him, but, I see his mojo and he's moving forward and he's still the guy. And I think that he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder from this weekend. So the other thing I want to talk about is some of the, I wrote drama, but really it's just the Larson beefs. So do you see anything happening this weekend between Larson and Hamlin, and Larson getting any type of payback, or do you see anything stemming from the Larson Elliott thing that's going on?
I'll start with the Larson Elliott thing. I think that's blown up out of proportion way more with their diehard fans. I think their fans are truly fanatical in some aspect, right? Their drivers can do no wrong. And, I understand that even Elliott was upset about it because all he saw was Larson hit him. And then he goes back and watches the replay and he's like, oh yeah, like he had nowhere to go, right? So somebody pushed him in. So I think between them, they're fine, right? I mean, that is if you go back to last year and there were much more questionable calls between the two and they were able to work it out, this is a no-brainer, inside their race meeting. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal at all. The Hamlin and Larson thing, honestly, I think Larson's had plenty of time to do it. It comes back to when Hamlin and Chastain were getting into it, right? And you could have doored him and he just kind of push him up into a wall and makes him race hard. Larson does that, right? He'll put you in a bad position and you have to choose to lift or potentially wreck you both. And if anything happens, I think one of them are going to be doing that, right? So they're going to put each other in a bad position and they're both competitive. I don't think either one of them will lift. So if anything happens, I think it'll be one of those versus a straight, quote unquote retaliation type scenario. So we'll see how it goes, but I wouldn't expect any major drama. Now, if that happens, then you might see a little bit of drama on pit road. But I think we're in for a relatively smooth day on that front.
Yeah. Yeah. Bristol used to be that place where you'd get excited for any fireworks on the pit road or Tony Stewart throwing his helmet or who knows what. And we've kind of gone away from that. But I'd be okay with any little drama there. We don't have it as much anymore. So, the Elliott Larson feud or whatever you want to call it, it reminds me a lot of, from 10, 15 so years ago of Gordon and Johnson. They are basically taking those roles of, the two most successful Hendrick guys right now. And 24 is giving them a run for the money this year, but they're still the guys. And it reminds me a lot of that. And, really it made Jimmy and Jeff race harder because they couldn't stand them, but they knew that they couldn't just rough him up just like they could another outsider, another team. So interesting. And I think that Elliott's just got a lot on his plate this year. I mean, he has not been himself. And, from, him getting injured to him getting booted out for a bit. And Corey jumped in that car for 1 week. But yeah, he just hasn't been himself. And to be honest, the path that he's going on, if his attitude weren't to change, I wouldn't be surprised that he doesn't start thinking about other plans in the future, not this year or next year or anything like that, but that he might start, thinking outside of the box as far as leaving Hendrick. Maybe he's not happy there. Maybe he can't be somewhere where he's now number 2 because Larson is, number 1. So
yeah, that would be interesting, right? You're talking about something that would shake up the NASCAR world. That would definitely do it, right? Particularly after he saw, Kyle Busch go over to RCR, right? I mean, you go from being the, number 1, number 2 guy with Denny at Gibbs to now, hey, you jump over to RCR and you start winning races, right? So there's potential there. Where he lands, nobody knows, right? If he ever decides. I think that would be a very hard pill to swallow with Rick Hendricks and just everyone in general, right? But it does see that he has a lot of frustration there. We'll see if it continues, right? I mean, he's got the entire, rest of the season and off season. And Alan his crew chief is just amazing to recenter. I mean, there's a reason why he's one of the best crew chiefs in the business, right? And I think they'll probably work it out and get him recentered. And there's a reason why he's a defending champ, and we'll see how it goes. But I think he'll probably center himself and get back to his glory.
Right.
Now, if he chooses to leave, then that leaves a spot for Corey, right? So, that's the way I look at it, right? I love Spire, but let's face it, Hendrick's got a whole lot more money.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Years down the road, right? We've got a long-term contract, so I'm thinking down the road.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Corey, this is his favorite race, is the Bristol night race. And, his average finish here is a not very sexy 27th out of 10 races. However, last year he qualified 31st, finished 15th, and the year before that he qualified 31st, finished 26th. What is your expectations for Corey at Bristol this weekend?
Well, that's a 9-spot differential, so with any luck we'll finish 4th, right? So that's the way I look at it. It's funny, right? As I look at Corey, and if you look at over 10 races, right, and even beyond, he has not had really good equipment, right? He's been in truly bottom of the barrel equipment before Spire. And so even going back to 2020 when he was with GoFast, he had a really good qualifying run at 21st and he finished 9th. So it shows that, we can extrapolate that basically Corey's really good at Bristol, right? So certain tracks lend themselves better to different drivers, right? And so assuming no bad luck calls, no messed up water temp sensors or blown out dashes or anything like that, hopefully he'll run really well and we'll get another top 10, right? I think the way that if you take the two different types of data trends that we've seen, right? So one is his history of continually getting better year over year at Bristol, right? Particularly this year, we know that he's been doing a lot more sim time and putting a lot more work because Spire's getting to that size. But also just the amount of, with the new, because it's a new team, Sparks now has, a good 2 years of his playbook built up, right? So he knows what to do. Add in the Gamebridge announcement financially. And just over the last 4 or 5 weeks, you've seen a major change with that, right? Now, not always the finishes. Usually we have some bad luck on finishes, but whether it's qualifying or during the runs, we see that that's already having a direct impact. So if I put all that together, assuming no more bad luck calls, I think he has a shot to be, top 10, maybe a top 5, depending upon, some strategy calls during the race.
Yeah, for sure. He's definitely a driver that excels in short tracks. I think that was most of his upbringing, and anywhere that a driver can make a difference, where they can either move you out of the way or find a little edge somewhere here and there, he seems to do well there. Darlington, Martinsville, and obviously plate tracks, he's learned how to draft pretty well. But
it's funny, right? It's like, oh yeah, small track, but he's known for plate tracks, right? So the Atlanta, the Daytona, the Talladega, in terms of where he typically finishes. But yeah, that when you say he likes the small tracks, it's like, right, two different ends of the spectrum, and it really shows. You wouldn't think about it, but when you look at the raw hard data, it does show.
Yeah, and he's been doing really good this year with road courses too. I think that's where he's been spending most of his sim time, and they've put a ton of effort into that, and it's shown. I mean, I think that's probably his most consistent. I don't have the stats, but his road courses this year, I feel like he has had the most consistent, top 15 eligibilities every weekend. Whether or not it works out at the end of the race or not, that's where he's racing during the whole race. So, been pretty cool to see. Okay. And so my last little topic here to talk about is eliminations. It is a cutoff race, and interesting to see that Martin Truex Jr., who we were just talking about, he is the regular season champion. He is now hurting, and he potentially could be bumped out. He's in the bottom 4. So is Bubba Wallace, Ricky Stenhouse, and Michael McDowell. And you have Harvick and Logano. They are the closest drivers above the cut line, but only by like 7 and 8 points or something like that.
Right.
which is really nothing. So wanted to know, who do you see? Do you see just the bottom four getting booted out, or do you have somebody different?
No, I mean, look, going back to your earlier, question, like those points for Truex winning the regular season championship, there are a reason why he's only 7 points below the cut line, right? Whether or not that he jumps Harvick, look, I mean, Harvick's, a Hall of Famer, first round bid, whatever you want to call it, right? Like he's the closer. So he always finds a way at the end. I don't know, like realistically, I could potentially see Truex and Harvick jumping, Christopher Bell or maybe Ross Chastain, right? So I think Chastain can sometimes be a little too aggressive, and that might end up biting him at Bristol, right? So he gets twisted and turned and a lap down or something, and then now he's out of the playoffs. So I think that'll be pretty interesting. I think Ricky was, if you went back and looked at Kansas, he was pretty frustrated. He was racing really, really hard. At one point, he was racing really hard right in front of Corey, and it looked like they were going to wreck for 5 or 10 laps straight. So I think he'll probably still be out. McDowell is really far down. So and I don't necessarily think that Bristol's considered one of his strong suits. So I'd probably put a lock in for Steinhaus and McDowell for being out, and then we'll see, right? Maybe Bubba pulls off something great, but it's going to be tight for him.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to see Martin Truex not make it through, if that's what ends up happening. I was thinking about who I think Wallace, Stenhouse, and McDowell are not going to make it through this round. I think my fourth, I can't go with Truex. Just don't feel like it'd be right. So I unfortunately don't want it, but Harvick would be the strongest suited person to be booted out. Another person that I was thinking about until I did more research and see how many points, how much of a cushion he had, but has not been impressing me very much lately, is Ryan Blaney. He seems to be very, he's somebody that's known to get into his emotions in the car, and he's not particularly a fighter, but he can let his anger get to him quickly and ruin his day. So wouldn't be surprised if he gets frustrated somewhere and gets into the wall and bends a toe link, and then who knows what, finishes dead last. So never know.
Well, I'm a little superstitious, right? So I'm blaming a certain tire changer's appendix, right? If you listen to the Stacking Pennies, right, he's been out for a few weeks, and coincidentally, Blaney hasn't really performed exceptional then, right? So obviously the Daytona crash was not his fault, so you can't really blame him. He was actually looking extremely strong that entire race until that happened. So coincidentally, that's when Ryan came back then, right? So I think he said he just turned around and put his gun away. So hopefully that the Stacking Pennies magic will work for Blaney, and he'll get it around, right? So I like pulling for Blaney, mostly because of Stacking Pennies at the end of the day, right? So we'll see how it runs. But
yeah, it's always tough to watch these playoffs, man. I mean, in a way I love it because it's good TV, because you want the drama, you want the drivers to be on the edge and be angry, right? Like that's what, we all love a little bit of drama, but man, there's such a debate about, the fairness. And I really hate the fact that, you worked all this season, and by the way, now you're not eligible anymore. And you just all that matters is the past 3 races. But again, I guess, that's the way playoffs go, right? You got to win the football game to keep going in the playoffs or what have you. But it just, it's a bummer, man. But yeah, man. Well, Alex, man, I appreciate you coming on the show and chatting a little racing with me.
Absolutely. So anytime.
All right, brother. Well,
back, right? So 2 years rolling, and it's always fun to talk.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's pretty cool. Hopefully people enjoy listening to us talk about a bunch of nothing. So
there you go.
So, all right, man. Well, God bless, and I'll see you in North Carolina in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Let's play some kickball.
All right, man. See you.
Bye.
Alex, man, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It means a lot that you come and take the time away from your family to just chat about NASCAR with your buddies. So otherwise, y'all, appreciate you so much. If you could, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things on YouTube. If you are in audio realm, rate and review. Let everybody know you're listening to The Shoe Show. And if you haven't come and hung out with us on Facebook, that's where it all started. Team Super Shoe on Facebook. It's a group where we have a lot more conversation there than we do here. That's where it all started. Otherwise, y'all, I appreciate you so much. Please do not forget to do the INEGU challenge. It will mean a ton to a lot of families that are really struggling right now. Otherwise, y'all, thank you. God bless. Stay safe. Go Corey LaJoy.